Brethren, welcome to this week's edition of the Thank Goodness It's Friday video blog. Coming up, we have an interview with Duncan Rouse. In April, Duncan is to be appointed as an Assistant Provincial Grand Master. In his interview, he confided in two facts that not many people will know about him. One of those facts is that he is a qualified judge, but you will have to keep listening to find out the full story. But coming up, the roundup of the news across the province, and this week we're going to take a look at the events being planned by the 2025 Festival Committee. One of the events is there is an opportunity to be able to buy tickets later on in the year to be able to win a brand spanking new Mercedes car. In April, we will see the Great East Kent Boat Race taking part. And in May, there is a virtual wine tasting with cheese. In June, there is an audience with Sir Ian McLennan. And in July, we also have an audience with Rick Wakeman. In August, there is a virtual casino night. And in September, there is the East Kent Chase with Bradley Walsh. And finally, in December, there is a celebrity Christmas lunch in London. If you're interested, we will let you know when the bookings go live for these events. But first, over to the interview with Duncan Rouse. We have with us here today, Duncan Rouse. Duncan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for inviting me this evening. I'm very much looking forward to having a chat with you.
So, Duncan, let's just start with some context. In April, you are going to be appointed as an Assistant Provincial Grand Master. Are you nervous, and what are your fears and expectations?
Yes, of course I'm nervous, Richard. I don't think it would be normal not to be. I think the appointment that has been or is going to be made is a great honour for me, and I also know from the time that I've spent working with David Alexander as part of the Education and Welfare Group, I know from that it's going to be a challenging role too. He's going to be leaving some big shoes for me to fill, and it will certainly be a challenge to me to fill them. Having said that, I think it's good to face challenges, and it's perfectly okay to be slightly nervous, as one certainly doesn't want any complacency to creep in.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And but the moment that the Provincial Grand Master either spoke to you or wrote to you and actually invited you to consider accepting this position, can you tell us how you felt?
Well, I must say, when I was or when I received the letter from the Provincial Grand Master, it was actually quite memorable, because it was in July and not long after the end of the first lockdown period, and this letter came through the postbox, and it appeared to be from the provincial office. But the handwriting on the envelope wasn't any handwriting that I recognised as such. However, on opening the letter, I realised that it was from the Provincial Grand Master and on provincial letterhead. Now, I wasn't expecting any correspondence from the Provincial Grand Master, and upon reading the letter, I noticed after reading the first couple of paragraphs that he was of a mind that as I had been in post as Provincial Grand Almoner for, well, what was the best part of 4 years, that it was probably time for him to make some changes, and that I should perhaps be handing over the reins to somebody new. As you can imagine, having got that far, I was actually slightly disappointed, because I hugely enjoyed my job as provincial Grand Almoner. But reading on through the letter, it then became apparent in the next couple of paragraphs that he was actually asking me if I would also like to consider his invitation to become an assistant provincial Grand Master. And I think at that time, my disappointment turned to an initial feeling of fear and anxiety as to whether I would be able to fulfill the inevitable expectations that come with such an appointment. That fear and nervousness still, to a certain extent, remains, as I said earlier. But as I finished the letter, I must say that I then started to feel extremely honoured and privileged to have been invited to take this appointment. And I guess the next thing I did after that was I started to plan the best way to discuss this with my wife, whose blessing I would want before obviously going back to the provincial Grand Master with a positive response.
I mean, that actually sounds absolutely wonderful, and it's an honour to be able to receive such a letter from the provincial Grand Master, and I'm sure you'll find that everybody be only too willing to to help you.
I'm
So,
counting on that.
so have you been given your remit or your portfolio yet by the provincial Grand Master?
Well, Richard, I mean, the answer to that is yes and no. And the reason I say that is that PGM has told me in his letter and in subsequent discussions we've had that I will be replacing David Alexander, who, as we all know, is stepping down. Now, his brief was education and welfare. So in broad terms, that is, I think, what my responsibilities will be. But the PGM also said to me that he was thinking of making some small tweaks to the various responsibilities of the assistant provincial Grand Masters. And as yet, I haven't heard anything further from him on that. So that's why I answer yes and no.
Wonderful. So you are appointed, as indeed so is every assistant provincial Grand Master, but you're appointed for a term of 4 years. Now, this is a bit of a, I suppose, bit of a big, wide open question. So what do you hope to achieve during this time?
Yeah, that is a big, wide open question, and it's actually quite a difficult question to answer. But first and foremost, I want to say that under the leadership and direction of David Alexander, the Education and Welfare Group has carried out some absolutely excellent work. And I know that David has left a well-oiled machine in place. Now, with the exception of the provincial Grand Almoner, who will be new, I am hoping that the team will remain the same, at least for the immediate future. Now, this team has achieved quite a lot in the past 4 years and made good use of the changes and innovations that there have been. And I would like to think that that we will be able to respond to future changes, needs and opportunities and support the well-being and personal development of the members of our Masonic family.
Excellent. And I'm sure you will do well at it. So we don't really know that much about you, Duncan. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Are you married? Are you still working?
Yes, Richard, I am married. I've actually been married for 40 years, and in fact celebrate 40 years of marriage to my wife Colleen this May. Am I still working? Well, in terms of gainful employment, the answer is no, as I retired from my job working for an Italian bank about 6 years ago. However, I'm still a trustee of the bank's pension scheme, and I'm also a trustee of the Cornwallis East Kent Freemasons charity. And those roles, together with my role as provincial Grand Almoner, means that I don't really sit around too much wondering about what to do next. Um, and in my free time, I like to get out in the garden, do a bit of gardening, and I also enjoy playing bridge as it keeps the grey matter ticking over.
Well, congratulations, Duncan, on your 40 years of marriage. Actually, did you know that the safest place in the home is actually at the sink doing the washing up? Because
Really?
there is no recorded crimes of murder all the time that the husband is actually standing at the sink. So it's the safest place. But you didn't
I
know
do spend a bit of time there.
that. So um, tell us something that we don't know about you. You know, something that's kind of will surprise us.
Yeah, I think I could be a bit careful here because these are the things that come back to haunt you if you're not careful what you actually say. Um, so just one thing, eh? Or maybe I could mention a couple. I think one thing that not a lot of people know about, and I don't wish to sound like Michael Caine there, but I did a photo shoot as a male model in the 1960s. Um, and that came about basically because I was a young chorister in the village church choir of the in the little village in Hertfordshire where my family lived. And one of our neighbours, their daughter worked for an advertising agency, and they had been requested or received an assignment from ICI, who had just launched a new synthetic material called terylene. They were given an assignment to find some young lad to go out and model these clothes that were made out of this material. Um, I got to admit that I wasn't particularly inspired or enthusiastic about doing it at the time, but my mother and my grandparents seemed very keen that I did do it. So in the end, we went up on the appointed day to London Zoo, and I spent the day wandering around the zoo, posing with various animals in the zoo and having my photograph taken, wearing various clothing made out of this terylene material. Um, the good point about it was I actually got paid quite a good sum of money for doing it. And I remember that I managed to use part of that to buy my first full-sized bicycle. So yeah, it had its rewards. The other thing I was going to say, if I can say another one, which is I'm actually a qualified judge, and not a lot of people know that either. But I'm not a judge in the legal sense. I'm actually a horticultural judge, and I judge vegetables and flowers at horticultural societies shows within Kent, certainly. Anyway, so there you go. There's a couple of bits.
So Duncan, so let me get this right. So you've been a male model. You were able to judge the size of people's marrows. You've been married for 40 years. So what made you join Freemasonry all those years ago?
Yeah, I think really going back, I was invited to join Freemasonry by two very good friends of mine in the village where I live. And this came about because the old school lodge of which they were members was changing its admission criteria to allow parents of children who attended the school to become members of the lodge. Previous to that, it had only been old boys of that school. Now, my elder brother was also a Freemason at that time, although he was relatively new, having joined a lodge up in the Medway towns. And he told me that it was something that he very much enjoyed doing it, and that he thought that I would also enjoy it. So, accepting the invitation of my two friends, I attended a ladies' night dinner with my wife, held in a hotel in Cranbrook, actually. And I must say, I very much enjoyed the evening and enjoyed the company of the people that were there. So that's basically how it was, how it went. I also must say that my maternal grandfather was a Freemason. He was a Freemason up in Durham, and although he didn't talk very much about it, I must say he was an absolutely excellent man and someone that I respected very much. So that's really what led me into it. And that's against the backdrop, Richard, of being the age I am. I sort of grew up in my youth at a time when Freemasonry was the butt of many jokes and comedy sketches. And it's probably fair to say that when I did first decide to go into Freemasonry and was initiated into the lodge, the beginning wonder exactly what I was getting myself into.
Well, it's always nice to hear and understand the reasons why people actually joined. I find that absolutely fascinating. But obviously, through Freemasonry, you over the years you've sort of ended up with the position of the provincial Grand Almoner. So you spend a long time really caring for others. Do you think through that particular role that you've been able to make a difference?
Um, have I made a difference? That's an interesting question, because I'm probably not the best judge of that, to be honest. It's true to say that I have been very fortunate to be in a position where I am able to facilitate help and support being given to others. And in my role, I'm very privileged to have had an extremely wonderful, capable, and supportive team of group almoner coordinators and visiting volunteers. And I'm going to mention their names because they're unsung heroes. And I'm talking about Richard Dixie, David Barden, Phil Zigman, Eddie Halpin, Mick Bremerkamp, Ernie Walker, Kevin Kemp, Headley Grace, and John Fry. And so without them, and also the two or three who have stepped down during my term of office, and by those I mean Vic Voss, Bob Ayling, and Andy Dive, and with these guys' help and support, together with the support and wisdom of David Alexander, I don't think I would have been able to have done an effective job as provincial Grand Almoner. And in saying that, I mustn't also forget the enormous contribution of our lodge almoners, who are instrumental in bringing to our attention those who may need help and support. And I've also been lucky to have excellent support from a lady called Lauren Moulds, who is the MCF advice and support team officer for our province. So in answer to your question, I think with these people and the help of the MCF, I very much like to think that we have made a difference to the lives of a number of people. And that, in my opinion, is one of the most rewarding things about being the provincial Grand Almoner and being a lodge almoner.
Duncan, that is, yeah, I think you're probably being a little bit conservative, because obviously you and I have done some work together, um, and I have seen the difference that you really have made, particularly through these lockdown periods where um, lots of members have required help, and I've seen that help going to them firsthand. So um, for me, that's a big well done and a big congratulations for the work that you and the team have actually done. But to finish, if there was one thing in the world that you could change, what would it be?
Hmm. Well, that's actually not too difficult to say, to be honest, because I think, given where we are today, I think the one thing I would change is this pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic, because, you know, we've all been living for the past year in this situation, which has had quite a devastating effect on the lives of many people. Not just us as Freemasons. It's obviously curtailed a lot of our activities and things, but it has had a devastating impact on people, and going forwards will probably continue to have an enormous impact on people, and not for the good. So I think if I could change one thing, I would have eradicated that, so that we haven't had to have had the past year that we've had.
Duncan, thank you ever so much. You can sit back and relax now. That is the end of the interview. And it was just really to kind of, introduce you to all the membership, and just to find out a little bit about you. So thank you ever so much. I'm sure I speak for every member in the province that we wish you well over these next 4 years, starting in April. And it goes without saying that we will give you all the support that you require. So thank you.
Richard, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk to everybody. I'm very much looking forward to my appointment, and I am very much looking forward to taking you all up on your offer of support and assistance in the 4 years that I am expected to hold this post. So thank you very much indeed.
Well, that's it for this week. We hope that you found it interesting. If you want to become involved, or if you want to publicise any of the activities of your lodge or chapter, please get in contact with us at the following email address, which appears just here. Until then, we will see you next week, and stay safe.